Hey, welcome back to my video. So glad you can join. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and press that notification bell. But anyways, for this week we'll be doing a Harry Potter theme, which I'm really excited for. I've been putting this off forever. I mean, one of the most iconic scenes in my mind is when he first sits down to eat like that sumptuous feast in his first year. And the plate's all filled with food, and there's candles hanging from the ceiling, and it's just super bountiful and cozy. And I wanted to always eat those foods and watch Harry Potter at the same time. And 'tis the season when I think of Christmas movies, Harry Potter, although it doesn't solely take place during this holiday, it definitely gives me those vibes. So for this here, I thought I'd do like turkey legs, roast potatoes, like kind of a sort of somewhat traditional Sunday roast that I believe people in the UK do, or specifically England, and try to bake off some Yorkshire puddings while I'm at it. And to make it extra fun and whimsical, I thought I'd do a themed cake. I had debated for quite some time what I had wanted to choose, although it's not from the actual Harry Potter movies. It is from Fantastic Beasts, and that is the Niffler. If you don't know what the Niffler looks like, I'm going to go ahead and show it right now. But basically, it's like the cutest magical creature to ever exist, like in the history of fantasy and magic, and I just love him so much. And he has like an attitude problem, and he's greedy, and he's a rascal, and that just makes him even more lovable. But when I saw him on screen, I just fell in love. It gave me the same warm, fuzzy feelings as seeing Grogu for the first time as well, if that gives you any indication of how much I freaking love the Niffler. So I thought I'd do a version of him, keep him small. It's a cake that'll be split between me and my husband's. I don't want to go overboard and make like a 5-tier monstrosity, because I don't really feel like being stressed during this time. I have a lot on my plate still. And as for his insides, I thought I'd do something a little bit holiday-y and try this Perfectly Moist Spice Cake Mix by Duck and Heinz. Yes, I'm cheating and using a cake mix, but this is what I'll mostly be doing in terms of cake decorating. I'll leave like the yummy, scrummy cakes that I bake from scratch a little easier on the decorating side of it, and when I really want to go all out with the fondant and like sculpting insanity, I'll go with cake box mix because I don't want to drive myself insane. I've never had spice cake before. I actually never heard of it, and when I look at it, I just think pumpkin spice, and it seemed festive enough to use for this cake. So we're going to go ahead and start building the cake, and later on, after it's all done, hopefully it's successful, I'll also be putting together a cozy meal that we can eat while we watch the very final Harry Potter movies, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, because I've been slowly watching the whole series leading up to this holiday season. So let's get on to it. I had already pre-baked the cake the night prior to actually the day of assembly. So this is the cake that I baked in a 9-inch pan, which I then split into 3 even layers with that cake leveler. I finally managed a way to use it correctly this time. But actually putting together layers was still a really awkward process. You can see how clumsy I am at it. It might be worth it to invest in a square cake pan instead of a round one, because it was kind of hard for me to kind of judge how many layers I needed to get to how high so that I could shape his little body. His body isn't necessarily the simplest of shapes, so yeah, it was just pretty awkward. Once I got him to the height I wanted, I began to slowly shave him down prior to crumb coating him. If you can't tell already, my method of doing things is just to wing it, and it doesn't turn out perfect, but at least I'm practicing somewhat, and maybe I'll learn something new for the next time. Again, I had difficulty crumb coating because it kept kind of falling apart. It might also be that my cake batter was a little too moist to work with. Moist and fluffy. The next thing I did was try to color my own fondant. The Niffler is mostly black with little bits of gray, but I was going for a pure black anyways with this gel food coloring I had purchased and some white fondant. But it was a fail. It came out gray. I just couldn't achieve black. So I ordered more fondant. I ordered black, and I decided to make my own skin tone because they don't sell skin tone fondant. It came out a little orange, but that was okay because I thought I'd go in later and kind of paint his little like pink bits to make him look a little bit more shaded and realistic. So the parts that aren't covered in fur are his face, his hands, and his feet. This was a day where I had this extra fondant come in, but I was still waiting on the black, so I thought I'd go ahead and tackle his little features while I waited for the delivery to arrive. And finally, the day came where the black fondant arrived at my house, and I ordered this like Buddy Velastro Cake Boss fondant as opposed to, I believe the other brand is called Wilton. I might be wrong. It's a really famous brand. I'm sure you've seen it before. But I got this Buddy Velastro one just because of the price point. It was a lot softer, which I did enjoy because it was much easier to roll out. But as I laid the fondant on the actual body of the Niffler, it's so soft that it starts to tear if it's hanging for too long. So I had to be really careful with that, especially because it's such an awkward shape. I had to kind of tear off as I go. Like it makes these little folds, like almost like a curtain, but it just means there's too much clumping fondant. So I don't know which brand I like better. They both have their pros and cons for sure. At this point, I realized that I was making him a little chunky. I mean, chunkier is always cuter. But he kind of had like a Jabba the Hutt silhouette, so it's not too disappointing. It's just something that I have to consider next time in terms of sculpting a more complicated silhouette. Another thing about fondant is that it's hard to seamlessly join seams, lack of a better word. Like if you put the fondant on in patches, you won't get like a clean surface area. I mitigated this by giving him like a furry texture with my sculpting tools, which I was going to do anyways, but it kind of helped to hide the seams that I didn't want showing. I also had to prop up his little beak with some tin foil so that he could harden because it kept sagging down. After it was fully dried, I went in with food coloring actually. I used like a mixture of pink and brown to give him just a little bit more depth. I wanted to bring a little bit more life to him. The final step to his actual body was adding his eyes, and I really just couldn't stop cracking up at this part. I was very nervous about the whole process, but once his eyes were on, I felt a little bit more confident. Now, since it was a cake for the holidays, I had thought about making him hold a candy cane or giving him a Santa hat, but I had all this extra green fondant from my previous Cthulhu cake that I wasn't doing anything with, so I thought, why don't we make it easy and just give him a simple scarf? So last minute, I whipped it up real quick. It's funny because I had bought like all these tools to work with, but I still relied on like a really cheap steak knife and also a vegetable peeler to get the textures that I wanted. I'm just not used to having handy dandy tools on me, so it's not like instinctual for me to use them yet, so I need to work on that. But I gave him kind of like a knitted texture to his scarf and also like little fringy tassely bits at the end to make it look more scarfy. And to attach him, I made sure to wet around his neck so that the scarf actually sticks to his body. But I thought it was pretty cute. And I was finally ready for my Harry Potter feast. I made roast potatoes and Yorkshire puddings, which I think came out really good. A little bit oily, but I'm still working on my proportions. So that's Yorkshire puddings, some smoked Gouda, brie, the roast potatoes again, a turkey leg, and a turkey wing. Of course, I also had to have a butterbeer. If you've ever bought Flying Cauldron butterbeer, you might already know, but it pops like champagne, so be prepared for that if you've never had this before. I will say that it tastes really good. You're missing like the foam and the froth on top that you get at the parks, but still a really good substitute to have. I know people who eat traditional roast dinners will usually have gravy on hand. I didn't, but I decided to use some hot sauce instead to dip both my roast potatoes and my Yorkshire puddings in. I know, not very traditional, and I'm not sure, do people eat Yorkshire puddings with a fork and knife? Because I was just picking it up like a bread roll pretty much. Apologies if that offends anyone. course, for dessert, I had the Niffler. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of me actually eating the guy, but he was very delicious. It made me a little sad, but also it was super satisfying to cut through his little chubby body. Really happy with how the layers actually turned out. But anyways, thanks so much for watching if you made it to the end. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Happy New Year!